Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's webinar co-organized by Oista Foundation with several keynote speakers that they're going to be presenting themselves during the following minutes. We're going to be talking about the role of the fourth industrial revolution technologies in countering trade-based money laundering, the challenges and opportunity in a post-pandemic economy. This roundtable webinar is organized in view to the World Law Congress in Colombia 2021 that will be hosted December 2nd to December 3rd in Barranquilla in Colombia. This Congress is a predominant jurists in the world will meet together during the World Law Congress, and with the aim to be recognized from the international legal community of Colombia as a commitment to the defense, strengthening, and promotion to the rule of law. So today, during the presentation, we are going to be covering several issues. We are going to be discussing about illicit trade. How big is this problem? How are we getting affected both at government level but also at consumer level? We're going to be discussing how technologies are being used, both sides of the spectrum. Technology is being used to protect us against illicit trade, but also technology being used to accelerate illicit trade, both in terms of its production and also financing. I have a very prestigious list of speakers with us today. We have Eloisa, Cadenas, CEO of Cryptofintech. We have Daniel Ackerman, International Computing, Hacking, and Intellectual Property Advisor at the U.S. Department of Justice. We have Joshua Potter, Deputy Executive Director of the International Coalition Against Illicit Economies. And we have Miguel, Larios, partner at Cremades, and Calvo, Sotelo, law firm in Spain and organizer of the World Law Congress. So we also have two introductions to be done by Juan Carlos Sainz-Borgo and Alejo Campos. Those introductions, together with Eloisa Cadenas, will be done in Spanish. For Spanish-speaking attendees, you have an interpretation button at the end, at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And if you click there, you can choose the channel. So we will be covering Spanish and English. So without saying more, this is going to be a debate that also is totally interactive. So you are most welcome to submit your questions directly. I will forward those questions to the panelists, and the panelists are also free to answer them directly. The idea is to make this as live and interactive as possible. So I would like to now introduce Juan Carlos Sainz-Borgo. He will say a few words in Spanish, followed by Alejo Campos. I will just maybe request the speakers to introduce yourself, your background, and then we will go through the Q&A. So Juan Carlos, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Carlos. You said that we should do it in Spanish, so right, let's do it in Spanish. Buenos días para todos y para todas. Muchas gracias por la oportunidad de colaborar en la organización de este evento. Como ya Carlos mencionó, mi nombre es Juan Carlos Sainz-Borgo. Yo soy abogado, especialista en Derecho Internacional durante ya algunos años. El pelo blanco creo que testimonia que ya son bastantes años dedicados al tema. Me desempeño como profesor titular en el área de Derecho Internacional de la Universidad para la Paz y como decano de la Universidad para la Paz en este momento. Me gusta, en particular en esta ocasión, quiero hablar de lo que es nuestro trabajo en la cátedra sobre el combate del comercio ilícito y la prevención del crimen organizado transnacional, que es el área dentro de la universidad que está trabajando en la organización de este evento. Para nosotros ha sido una gran oportunidad de tener el financiamiento y el apoyo en base al ODS 17 con la empresa privada y otras organizaciones para trabajar lo que significa la construcción de paz y las amenazas de paz desde varias perspectivas. Pensar que el crimen organizado no es una parte importante en las amenazas a la paz es mirar solo una parte del problema. Es decir, el crimen organizado es una de las permanentes amenazas a la construcción de una paz sustentable y que se da en diferentes lugares a lo largo del proceso. Desde lo que significa el tráfico ilícito de sustancias prohibidas, desde lo que significa el tráfico de personas, migrantes, pero también todo lo que significan las nuevas tecnologías y todo lo que tiene que ver con criptomonedas como una forma donde esto se puede expresar. En ningún momento queriendo demonizar todas las nuevas tecnologías, sino entender que desde una perspectiva amplia para la construcción de la paz, desde la perspectiva internacional hay que estar muy adelante de lo que son los desarrollos tecnológicos, porque sin duda, como decíamos en un evento anterior organizado por la cátedra, el crimen organizado tiene departamentos de inteligencia, tiene departamentos de recursos humanos, tiene gente que está pensando que uno normalmente no lo ve así. Uno tiende a tener una visión un poco romántica, negativa de lo que es el crimen organizado, y son empresas para producir dinero. Entonces, para nosotros los que queremos luchar contra esto, la idea de tener grupos de personas pensando en estas amenazas y cómo bloquearlas o al menos limitar su impacto es lo que estamos haciendo. Así que le agradezco muchísimo a nuestro equipo de la Cátedra contra el Combate Ilícito y la Prevención del Crimen Organizado, Mauricio Vieira y Emma Faris, y a todo el equipo que ha estado trabajando, tanto Alejo como Carlos, en esta iniciativa. Así que muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share a little bit. And I'm going to be here listening very quietly what you are going to discuss. Thank you very much, Carlos.
Daniel, thank you very much. Muchas gracias por la presentación, y yo creo que sería bueno que te quedes también porque va a haber interacciones con los speakers en el futuro. So I would like now to give the floor to Alejo Campos.
Gracias, Carlos. Bueno, mi nombre es Alejo Campos, soy el director regional de la organización Crime Stopper International para el Caribe, Bermuda y América Latina. Nuestra oficina regional se encuentra en la ciudad de Panamá, desde donde vemos todo el trabajo de los países en los cuales tenemos oficinas activas. Nuestra misión, obviamente la organización tiene más de 44 años desde que nació adentro de la Policía de los Estados Unidos, y su misión y todos sus objetivos han ido evolucionando, a tal punto que hoy en día básicamente estamos trabajando en el tema de la persecución y el control de las organizaciones del crimen transnacional organizado y todas sus actividades ilícitas. En este contexto, evidentemente, estamos tratando de impulsar este concepto que ha salido en algunas webinars y sesiones de trabajo, que es el tema de reconocer la existencia de sistemas nacionales y regionales de economías ilícitas, y trabajar en ese sentido, persiguiendo el dinero, persiguiendo los fondos. Recién Juan Carlos hablaba muy bien de los efectos del crimen transnacional organizado en las poblaciones de nuestros países, pero para ser efectivo en el combate tenemos que seguir el rastro del dinero. Es la única forma. Y para esto nosotros desde el año 2019 hemos puesto en nuestro portafolio de trabajo el tema de Trade-Based Money Laundering como uno de los objetivos principales. Hemos venido trabajando en temas de comercio ilícito desde hace muchos años, e incorporado el tema de Trade-Based Money Laundering desde el año 2019, cuando en conjunto con Gafilat hicimos en Panamá un encuentro con los 17 países de América Latina, donde convocamos en Panamá a los directores de las aduanas, a los directores de las unidades de análisis financiero y a los directores de las fiscalías especializadas en blanqueo de capitales, para poder entender entre todos ellos la nueva dinámica, la tipología, las metodologías del blanqueo a través del comercio, y de esa forma generar un grupo de trabajo y algunas recomendaciones que luego se le dio seguimiento en estos años. Y además de eso, que es algo que quiero traerles porque es algo muy reciente, la semana pasada realizamos en Panamá, en el Parlatino, en conjunto con la Fundación Konrad Adenauer, que ha sido un socio estratégico en estos temas, realizamos un encuentro de parlamentarios, invitando a Panamá a los presidentes de las comisiones de seguridad y de defensa, y de las comisiones de economía o de finanzas, depende de cada país, para justamente dialogar sobre este tema de las economías ilícitas y hacerlo en forma conjunta, porque a veces cuando lo ve economía no ve la parte de seguridad, y cuando lo ve seguridad no ve la parte de economía y cómo impacta esto y cómo poder contrarrestarlo. Ese diálogo fue muy fructífero con todos los parlamentarios y también con expertos internacionales que llegaron. Entre ellos también estaba Dan Ackerman, que nos acompaña esta mañana. Y de ahí quiero nada más resaltar 4 puntos que fueron considerados durante los 2 días de trabajo en el Parlatino. Uno es fortalecer mucho más el tema de la cooperación entre los países. Y también, de esto ya es una perspectiva muy nuestra desde la organización, que somos una organización global, pero que a mi cargo hay una parte regional, el tema de no seguir abusando tanto del concepto regional, porque a veces en algunos delitos específicos es más efectivo estudiar, entender el fenómeno para saber con qué países tenemos que cooperar. Les pongo un ejemplo muy claro. Acá en Panamá podemos tener buenas relaciones y buena cooperación regional con los países de Centroamérica, pero si nos vamos a una estructura de lavado de dinero a través de comercio, vemos que en realidad los países involucrados pueden ser China, pueden ser Canadá, pueden ser alguna isla del Caribe y después Panamá. Entonces, de nada sirve tanto regional, no estoy diciendo que no hay que seguir haciendo las cosas regionales, pero obviamente vamos a ser más efectivos si entendemos lo que está pasando, el fenómeno del trade-based money laundering, e incluir en casos específicos a los países que realmente están involucrados en la red, y no regionalizar por regionalizar. El otro tema es ser más fuertes e institucionalizar la cooperación público-privada. Y esto es fundamental, porque cuando hablamos de blanqueo a través del comercio, pueden existir los mejores analistas, en fiscalías, en aduanas y en las WIF, en las FIU de cada país, pero necesitamos entender el negocio. Y el negocio, quien lo entiende, es el propio sector comercial o industrial que está siendo afectado. Y lo hemos visto en algunos casos que han llevado a veces mucho tiempo en investigación, y cuando viene alguien del sector privado que está, digamos, siendo afectado o que entiende esa dinámica comercial, automáticamente entiende por dónde es que se está haciendo la transacción ilegal. Entonces, fomentar mucho más la cooperación público-privado es importantísimo. Legislación es el otro punto que se tocó. Las legislaciones, si bien en los países hoy en día, por mandatos, hay legislaciones que tienen que ver con el blanqueo de capitales, pero ya creo que es hora de ser específicos en tener legislaciones que sean sobre blanqueo de capitales a través del comercio, porque es una tipología que involucra a muchos sectores al mismo tiempo y que deben estar coordinados en una ley para que sea efectivo su trabajo. Y de ahí el gran trabajo que puede hacer Parlatino, y salió como una propuesta en las reuniones que tuvimos la semana pasada, de generar una ley marco, una ley modelo a nivel de Latinoamérica y del Caribe que hable específicamente sobre trade-based money laundering y que sirva como base a las legislaciones nacionales en cada uno de los países para decir, bueno, si vamos en esta asamblea, en este congreso, vamos a decidir tener una ley específica sobre este delito, entonces tenemos que hacerlo con una visión regional, porque es un problema transnacional. Entonces, si todos los países tienen esta ley, pero con una ley marco, un modelo que los impulsa y que los sostiene, entonces eso va a ser mucho más efectivo la lucha. Y por último, el uso de las tecnologías. Hoy en día tenemos que apostar a las tecnologías, lo decía muy bien Juan Carlos, la gente que se dedica al crimen transnacional organizado son personas altamente profesionales, profesionalizadas, con muchísimos recursos y que usan el recurso de la tecnología. No podemos desde Latinoamérica seguir entendiendo un patrón de trade-based money laundering usando un Excel. El uso de las tecnologías tiene que ser ya, y para eso es necesario la inversión, ya sea a través de cooperación internacional o entender este fenómeno desde las autoridades públicas, desde los parlamentarios que terminan aprobando un presupuesto nacional, entender el beneficio que esto va a generar al país, no solo en reputación, sino en recaudación impositiva, y de esta forma poder invertir en tecnología. Entonces estas son algunas de las conclusiones y temas que se conversaron la semana pasada con parlamentarios de 12, 13 países de Latinoamérica, y que esto generó además la declaración de Amador, que es una declaración que tiene 2 componentes, un componente político, que es el compromiso de todos los parlamentarios de llevar estos temas a sus congresos nacionales, y por otro lado, una serie de recomendaciones técnicas que fueron emitidas por cada uno de los expertos internacionales que asistieron. Este documento, que ha sido firmado por todos los parlamentarios, ahora tenemos la tarea de darle seguimiento para poder implementarlo, y tenemos ahí un tiempo límite de generar un reporte de informes de avance de que se ha hecho a mitad del próximo año. Y casualmente esto lo vamos a presentar también como parte de las discusiones en la próxima reunión de la Asociación Mundial de Juristas en Barranquilla. Así que por parte nuestra de Crime Stopper estamos a disposición de todos ustedes para acompañar técnicamente el proceso sobre fortalecer la lucha contra el trade-based money laundering. Muchas gracias, Carlos.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alejo. You actually framed very well the discussion, as we will be compartmenting ourselves into many of the areas that you just touched now. Just maybe some other information is that this webinar is being broadcast live in YouTube, so you have a button on the top. The support staff can forward that button in social media, so you can increase the number of viewers. So maybe just to introduce myself before I open formally the webinar. So my name is Carlos Moreira. I am the founder of WiseKey. It's a Swiss cybersecurity AI company. We have been 22 years in the market. We are a Nasdaq listed company, very active in everything which is anti-illicit trade technologies from the entire spectrum, whether it's from putting microchips into objects, to providing a strong authentication to devices, to compiling data and analyzing the data using AI, and decentralizing the identification process through blockchain. I am also the Secretary General of OISTE, which in Spanish means Organización Internacional para la Seguridad de Transacciones Electrónicas, or International Organization for Secure Electronic Transaction, which is a Swiss foundation, NGO, member of the United Nations ECOSOC, which basically provides technology to projects that they are all working and fighting illicit trade. So it's a foundation that is very active in the technology side of the problem. I was also for many years, expert in the United Nations. I worked 16 years in the United Nations, and very active in everything related to this problem. So I would like now to move into the subject of the webinar. So as I mentioned before, if we could be brief in our introduction, so we have time for interactions among ourselves. And but maybe before we enter into the subject, I would like to welcome Miguel Larios. This webinar is avant-premiere for the event in Barranquilla. A lot of the points that we will raise and the notes we will take on this webinar will be used to animate another roundtable, but that time will be a presential roundtable, as we will be physically in Barranquilla in December, early December. And maybe Miguel, you can give us some views on what is the World Law Congress, and what is the history, and what are your recommendations for this roundtable towards bringing the conclusions to the meeting. Miguel, the floor is yours. If you like to speak Spanish, because we have translation, you're most welcome.
Well, thank you, Carlos. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be sharing this space with so many knowledgeable panelists. As you rightly said, I'm a member of the organizing committee of the World Law Congress Barranquilla 2021. The World Law Congress is basically a biannual congress organized by the World Jurist Association. And the World Jurist Association is quite an old association. It dates from 1953. It was founded by Charles Ryan, at that moment president of the American Bar Association, and Earl Warren, which was a Chief Justice at the Supreme Court in the US. And the main objective that they had was, in a moment of quite dangerous geographical and geopolitical conditions, as the Cold War was to create a space in which to promote the rule of law as the main guarantor of democracy and as the main guarantor of peace in the world. Okay, so that was their vision, and towards that vision, they counted with the support of a lot of statisticians, a lot of politicians, a lot of judges and magistrates in order to promote this idea towards the world. So they counted with the support of Sir Winston Churchill, at that moment Prime Minister of the UK, but also of Nelson Mandela, of Rene Cassin, the father of the human rights, and more recently, in another era, with support of the King of Spain, Felipe VI, and other great politicians, including Angela Merkel. This edition of the World Law Congress will celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Colombian Constitution and the 30th anniversary of democracy in Colombia. And it's obviously supported heavily by the Colombian government, the Colombian Ministry of Justice, as well as the municipality of Barranquilla. And the idea is to celebrate those 30 years, but also to continue with those global dialogues around the rule of law and around liberty and around democracy. And I think this subject is very, very important, this subject that we are going to treat today about the illicit trade, because obviously the illicit trade undermines the rights of people, underwrites the liberty, and also undermines the power of the institutions. Okay, so it's something that I think it will work very well with the other 50 or so roundtables that are going to be organized on the 2nd of December in Barranquilla. And the idea is to bring to the attention of all the public and the attention of all the institutions of the importance of the rule of law and the use of the rule of law to defend our rights, to defend the institutions, and to defend democracy at large. So basically everyone is invited to come to Barranquilla in December. It's a jurist congress. That means that we are not only lawyers, which is good news. There are only magistrates, there are judges, there are law professors, there are law students, and we're going to have many tables which are going to be focused on how can we educate the future jurists so they can defend and they can keep defending the values that we've been taught by all our democratic fathers. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'll be glad to answer any questions regarding the World Law Congress at the end of this debate. And I'm looking forward to the debate. It looks very, very interesting.
Thank you very much, Miguel. We also delighted to work with you in this project. I think it's the fact that illicit trade is a $2.2 trillion drain on the global economy is something that not only we are losing money. I mean, if you compare $2.2 trillion, this is the size of the economy of Brazil, or the size of the economy or Italy plus Canada. I mean, this is a very big problem, right? And this is not only the money that we drain from the economy, but this is the budget these people have to continue doing harm. So it's a vicious circle that needs to be interrupted. And I think technology can drastically help in that process, but also legislation and rule of law, which is what you're covering in the Barranquilla event. So maybe let's go really deep into the subject. So I would like to bring Daniel Ackerman on the regulation. During the introduction, Alejo mentioned about the need of not working at regional level or silos, but more into a global community. What is the steps the law enforcement and regulator community take to deal with this problem? Maybe you can walk us through that, Daniel.
Sure, and just to clarify, I am a federal prosecutor with the Justice Department. So even though I have a very fancy sounding title, that's actually what I am. And I build capacity for counterpart prosecutors and law enforcement officials throughout the region that handle cases that involve electronic evidence, devices, and sometimes cryptocurrencies as well. So I come at that question from that standpoint because that's my background. And so what we've been trying to do is to work with both private industry as well as foreign law enforcement partners in jurisdictions that are willing to cooperate and that have laws that clearly obligate virtual asset service providers to know their customers, to know the transactions they're involved in, and share that information with authorities pursuant to legal process that are investigating crimes like trade-based money laundering as well as other offenses. And then, through those efforts, identifying potential gaps that need to be addressed. They may be in terms of capacity building. They may be in terms of tools specifically that people need to do these investigations, because where you're talking, for instance, about cryptocurrencies, it's sometimes necessary to analyze blockchain data. And there are tools that law enforcement agencies worldwide increasingly use to assist with this, because otherwise the investigations could be too time consuming and may ultimately not be effective in de-anonymizing information that really can be de-anonymized, but only if done in the right way. So I would say, broadly speaking, those are kind of the main things that we're looking at.
Very good. Thank you very much, Daniel. So maybe if we stayed a bit on the region and how, I mean, obviously a lot of you guys are in that side of the world where the conference is going to happen as well. So maybe I can ask to Joshua to position the problem at the regional level and see whether that applies to other regions of the world, or are we having kind of exception here in the Central America region? Joshua, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Carlos. I appreciate it. And kind of to echo one thing that Daniel just said, which is, I believe, one of the most important points of this entire webinar is there are two components that we are looking for in order to help combat trade-based money laundering. The first one is providing evidence, prosecutable evidence. And we're going to continue to talk through that in different ways we can get there. But that is the first point. The second point is to have a willing prosecution team. Guys like Daniel are few, very few. They are a precious commodity. And every country on the planet needs to have guys like Daniel to help not only to build a digital case that can go in front of a prosecutor, but that it will make sense to a jury in order to convict a criminal activity. So that is what we have seen as a challenge. And to bring it down to the regional side, Carlos, in Central America, this is especially difficult because of the establishment of rule of law. We have evidence, especially in places, well, I'm not naming specific countries because I don't want to embarrass anybody, but we have weak legislation when it comes to digital evidence. We don't prosecute it very well. We don't collect it very well because people are concerned about their own privacy. And they don't trust a lot of the components of the government, which does in fact get hacked. So you have weak legislation, you have inadequate regulation, and then you have something which is very difficult in spaces like the free trade zones, which is poor supervision. You have all these components, and then you throw in a free trade zone in an area which is exempt from duty and taxes, and then you have everything going in and out of these types of warehouses, which contributes to over and under invoicing, which is the staple of trade-based money laundering. Those occur greatly throughout the FTZs. which is a absolute challenge, and it's terribly difficult to prosecute. And without people like Daniel, we won't get ahead. We are talking about something that is 7% of our global GDP. That we are representing. And my role of what I do at ICAIE, and I did this for years for the Department of Defense, is running the global transnational or counter-transnational organized crime groups and counter-threat finance groups and counter-narco-terrorism groups. So this is not new to anybody who's on this illicit panel, or this esteemed panel, but the challenges that we are facing are even more pronounced in this post-COVID environment because we're hyper-connected. Everybody's sitting at home in Amazon or on Amazon Prime, ordering things. We have a supply chain issue, which is just contributing more to the trade-based money laundering component. I'll pause there.
Very good. So maybe we can go again. I think we will need to educate the audience of what is exactly happening. Maybe we can zoom into the give a case study, right, on what is. Are we talking about tobacco? Are we talking about I am in Switzerland, or watches are the most counterfeited product on earth? What is the process? Maybe somebody from you guys, and I ask you the question openly. What is the process? Just document the process and see where are we maybe failing. And I guess Alejo mentioned something about not being able to react fast in terms of accessing the data. The data might be in silos. Those silos might not be shared. So maybe you, I don't know. I just opened Yoshua. Maybe you have obviously some ideas on that, and maybe also Daniel.
I'll actually wait because I just spoke. I don't want to take too much time, so I'll wait for somebody else to bring up.
Daniel, you want to take that or?
Well, sure. Currently, the department actually has several cases that are pending against administrators of different cryptocurrency mixing services, for instance, because that is a tactic that sometimes people will try to obfuscate the origin of illicit funds. They will try to mix their money with that of other people so that it becomes harder for an investigator to successfully trace those funds through blockchain analysis. And in those cases, unless I'm mistaken, we have alleged that the defendants conspired to launder money, that they operated a money service business within the meaning of the Bank Secrecy Act without a license. Actually, I take it back. There is a separate statute apart from the Bank Secrecy Act that requires that under certain circumstances, people who engage in money services business have to be licensed to do that. So we've alleged a violation of that statute as well. And I think that what this kind of does is show that we have to always look at potentially what type of crimes are being committed by these services, because ultimately they play a very key role in making the money laundering happen in the first place. It's one thing for someone to buy a cryptocurrency and then use it to buy narcotics, but they need help from someone else if they want to launder it, typically. And some of you may be aware that the department recently announced that it was forming a national cryptocurrency task force within the last few weeks that I think is going to be focusing a lot on prosecuting wherever possible in conjunction with foreign law enforcement partners and industry partners, that infrastructure. And so this means that we need our counterparts, and I've already made this point directly to folks here in Panama, where I'm based, and in other countries, that we have to see whether or not our laws clearly define, say, Bitcoin as a type of money, or as a type of asset, or as a type of property. Because if there's a risk that a judge later will say, well, the law doesn't say that, well, then that actually has to be fixed before we do any investigating, or it's arguably going to be, in vain. So I hope that what people kind of take out of that announcement was that though we obviously still care about people that sell and buy narcotics and other types of contraband on dark web forums, and people who make those types of marketplaces possible, we're increasingly realizing that it's just as important to focus resources on identifying the infrastructure that makes the laundering that people want to do of those funds possible. Because without that, it would potentially jeopardize a lot of that business and make it even harder to conduct. You're never going to wipe it out completely, but if you can have a real impact on bottom lines, that also is progress. But it will have to be international because we typically don't have jurisdiction ourselves over a lot of the targets that we may be investigating or a lot of the evidence we need to build those cases. And this means that we need our counterparts that share the same values to check their statutes, to check their regulations, think about whether or not they need to be updated. We recently updated the Bank Secrecy Act, for instance, to clarify that a virtual asset service provider is a financial institution. It is a money service business. We were moving in that direction anyway through opinions and comments, notices that had been issued by regulatory authorities, but it was important, I think, ultimately to codify all that. And so we will see ultimately how things turn out for the cases that we have in court, but we are not afraid to try. And so we encourage other countries to similarly take the same attitude, because this is a novel technology. There's nothing we can do except try to deal with it as best we can. And where we are not successful in court, identify the reasons and try to address that, whether, like I said, it's through capacity building or where necessary, updating laws.
Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely. And this opens a very big theme, right? Which is the crypto economy and how easy it is in our days as we are working in an anonymous environment. Crypto currencies, wallets are anonymous wallets. Therefore, anyone can be behind that wallet. That is being accelerated by all the new things that you can do, like NFTs. How much money laundering is going through NFT now. The issues of combining anonymous technology with decentralized ledger, and then a huge marketplace, which is the dark web, that makes all that so easy to exchange and to communicate it. It's actually of huge concern, right? Because we are losing the trades. So maybe Eloisa, can you walk through the how true is that money can be laundered with crypto assets? You have a lot of experience with that in Latin America. What is your views on this?
Bueno, muy buenos días en Latinoamérica, buenas tardes en otras partes del mundo, allá en Europa. Es importante destacar cómo se entienden los criptoactivos en materia de lavado de dinero y, para actividades ilícitas. Típicamente, a mí me gustaría comenzar o hablar de cómo la tecnología, cómo entendemos la tecnología precisamente en este entorno de lavado de dinero, ¿no? Si bien es cierto, una de las cosas hace muchos años, desde que Bitcoin surge, desde el lanzamiento de Bitcoin, existe esta idea que Bitcoin y otros criptoactivos se utilizan para lavar dinero. En esa parte o en ese sentido me gustaría destacar uno de los reportes de Chainalysis, uno de los últimos reportes en donde ellos efectivamente destacan que menos del 1% de las billeteras que contienen Bitcoin se provienen de dinero ilícito. ¿Esto qué quiere decir? A diferencia del dinero en efectivo, a diferencia del cash, con los criptoactivos es posible conocer toda la historia, tener la trazabilidad de hacia dónde se dirigen los recursos y los fondos. Me parece que a lo largo del tiempo, con el paso de los años, todos los jugadores que están dentro del ecosistema cripto han hecho un esfuerzo muy grande por seguir las recomendaciones que envía el Grupo de Acción Financiera, GAFI, y también todas las entidades en cada una de sus localidades, por ejemplo, aquí en México, la Unidad de Inteligencia Financiera, en materia de cómo seguir estas disposiciones o cómo llevar estos análisis en materia de prevención del lavado de dinero y conocimiento de los clientes o el KYC. Eso en América Latina, por ejemplo, les puedo comentar que probablemente el problema no son las disposiciones, el problema se encuentra en qué tanta preparación tienen los gobiernos y qué tan preparadas se encuentran las instituciones para hacer válidas o para implementar dichas disposiciones. Eso es uno de los grandes conflictos que existe, por lo menos se destaca aquí en el país. De hecho, GAFI en uno de los últimos reportes destacaba que de los 158 países, aproximadamente un tercio de ellos solamente podía dar cumplimiento a esas disposiciones. Entonces, desde mi perspectiva, me parece que es muy importante cómo todas las partes interesadas, los gobiernos, los operadores, los que están en la industria, las instituciones financieras tradicionales, cómo están comprendiendo estos jugadores o estas plataformas, estas exchanges, para impulsar el crecimiento y la adopción continua, porque es un crecimiento, vamos, no solo puede ser no solo puede ser una acción propia de las empresas que se encargan de proveer servicios con criptoactivos o activos virtuales. También es un trabajo en conjunto y vemos como plataformas como Binance, aquí en México Bitso, que es la más grande en Latinoamérica, Coinbase, en fin, Kraken, todas tienen controles muy rígidos en materia de prevención de lavado de dinero y también de identificación de los usuarios. Entonces, me parece que desde el lado de la industria privada ya sabemos que esta es una economía, no es algo vamos, ya no es como hace 5 años en donde, bueno, se tenía todavía mucho esa idea arraigada de que usar criptoactivos era un sinónimo de lavado de dinero. Actualmente no es así. La mayoría de los jugadores que están entrando al mundo de los criptoactivos buscan hacer esfuerzos muy grandes para poder identificar a todos y cada uno de los usuarios y cumplir con los estándares y las regulaciones que se piden. Aquí la pregunta, el cuestionamiento es, ¿qué tan preparados están los reguladores, las autoridades, las instituciones para poder cumplir con todas estas normativas y disposiciones? Es importante recordar que el ecosistema y las formas en las que se utilizan los criptoactivos no solo es para intercambio, tenemos minería, tenemos wallets digitales, las exchanges, la compraventa en un esquema peer-to-peer, en fin, compra de productos o servicios, hay todo un ecosistema alrededor y en cada una de esas partes seguramente existe un proceso de identificación. Me gustaría, digamos, en esta primera participación, destacar que por lo menos en Latinoamérica uno de los problemas más grandes es por un lado, la falta de conocimiento, ¿no?, en términos de cómo se están llevando estas prácticas y sobre todo, bueno, pues qué tan preparados están los países, sobre todo en Latinoamérica, para poder hacer frente a dichas operaciones o a dichas tecnologías.
Gracias, Eloisa. Sí, uno de los puntos y yo estoy de acuerdo contigo, de que el mundo de los criptoassets está regulándose por sí mismo y está llegando a crear un nivel de seguridad y de trazabilidad ideal, aunque hay muchas excepciones, pero puede ser que sea el mainstream. Pero hay una cosa que también pasa, que no solamente el money laundering, el lavado del dinero, es también la corrupción. Muchos de los problemas relacionados con comercio ilícito van baseados en un problema de corrupción, de poder, mira, si hacemos esto, yo te doy esto. Y desgraciadamente el pago de esa corrupción es mucho más fácil hacerlo con criptomonedas que con monedas fiat. ¿Estás de acuerdo con eso o tienes una visión sobre eso? Esa es mi experiencia. Yo trabajé con el World Economic Forum en PACHI, programa de anticorrupción, y hemos visto muchos casos donde, desgraciadamente, esto que te he contado pasaba.
Es probable, pero me parece que categorizar o que poner a los criptoactivos como esta única actividad para poder corromper o caer en prácticas de corrupción, no estoy totalmente de acuerdo, ¿no? No olvidemos los Panama Papers y recientemente las nuevas actividades que acabamos de ver, que no propiamente son con criptoactivos. Y creo que ahí es muy importante reflexionar, me parece es muy importante reflexionar porque si bien es cierto, habrá que hacer comparativos, ¿no? O sea, por ejemplo, en mi país, en México, sí, efectivamente, yo no dudo y seguramente hay actividades en términos de lavado de dinero a través de criptoactivos o de corrupción, pero también otro aspecto importante es en qué medida las personas saben utilizar, por lo menos en Latinoamérica, los criptoactivos o saben hacer este tipo de prácticas. Vemos que todavía el tema de educación financiera es relevante para poder aprender y tener la experiencia de usar criptoactivos. En El Salvador lo están haciendo, sí, efectivamente, porque es una imposición, porque está la ley Bitcoin y entonces se da esta adopción masiva, que, ojo, también habrá que estar muy al pendiente porque es probable que las prácticas pudiesen aumentar, ¿no? En un país en donde ya Bitcoin es una ley. Entonces, parcialmente estoy de acuerdo, precisamente porque me parece que hay que poner en una balanza y hay que hacer este contraste y las comparaciones. Si nosotros, por ejemplo, acá en México, los reportes por parte de la Unidad de Inteligencia Financiera, la herramienta o el vehículo número uno para seguir lavando dinero es el efectivo. Entonces, eso lo tienen los reportes de las autoridades y bueno, seguramente el tema de los criptoactivos resulta interesante porque en alguna de las partes, cuando se realicen operaciones, se va a buscar una salida y esa salida seguramente son las exchanges. Entonces, una labor, por eso es que comentaba, ¿no? Una de las grandes labores que están haciendo estas exchanges, pues es poner controles más estrictos en materia de conocimiento de los usuarios. Claro, se vuelve más complejo porque nosotros podemos hacer con criptoactivos ya no solo una transferencia en una región, sino que puede ser a nivel internacional. Entonces, identificar a los usuarios a nivel mundial requiere otro tipo de tecnologías. En fin, me parece que sí, efectivamente, los criptoactivos son una herramienta, es como un arma. Por ejemplo, con un arma podemos utilizarla para defendernos o también se puede utilizar para cometer un delito. ¿En qué medida se está haciendo? Me parece que eso es importante destacarlo, ¿no? Y cómo las prácticas, tener esos controles y esas mediciones, si van aumentando o van disminuyendo.
Muy bien, sí, es como el fuego, te puedes calentar o puedes quemar la casa, ¿no? ¿Cómo lo utilizas? Estoy de acuerdo. Maybe, Joshua, just maybe on the solution side, illicit trade, Is it possible because maybe the technology that brands are putting in their products is not good enough? They're easy to counterfeit, easy to smuggle. There's so much technology out there. We have track and trace technology, very mature, identity management, blockchain, decentralization in ledger as a way to verify the identity of the product when they are going through the customs. Is that being used by the people that they are defending the problem versus, I know that it's being used by the people doing the problem, creating the problem, because they're investing a lot of their money in technology. What is the balance of that fight?
Well, I can tell you one thing that's very clear, which is the threats for trade-based money laundering, they evolve faster than our protection measures. That's true. They are bound only by one thing. It's not truth. They are bound by the criminal imagination.
Sure.
That can be that's a very difficult adversary. But to answer your question, we've talked a lot about this, is what are the ways that trade-based money laundering threatens legitimate trade, reducing the relative value of authentic merchandise, the taxation and tariffs that are due to the governments, and the supply chain's denied. The quality of the merchandise is typically garbage, especially the counterfeit stuff. It's notoriously low and shabby. You're talking about, if you're dealing with sweatshops, they are not regulated for any safety or health conditions. You've got illicit manufacturers in the trade-based money laundering chain that often use slaves tied to human trafficking to keep the price of their merchandise real low. So what the hell do we do about it? That's your question. What do we do about it? Well, we can increase the manpower on the docks and ports of entry. We can increase the number of customs officials. We could generate more efficient ways of screening merchandise flowing through the global chain. These are all good ideas, manpower intensive, but they're centered around one word: transparency. Eloisa talked about it. Everybody has talked about transparency. Transparency is the enemy of corruption. Simple as that.
True.
And if you want to build a system based on trust, you have to open the gates of information. Now, you have to do this responsibly, of course, because if you open those gates of information with an entity, people or companies who are corrupt, you could, the entity could have a twisted heart or a foul purpose, then you can expect to be humiliated and used. Nothing, that's a bad relationship, personal or professional. So here's some of the roles technology plays. I'll give you 8. I only like dealing with 3s because I typically only count to 3, but I'm going to give you that many today. Roles technology plays with regards to software, mobile applications, database analysis to go after trade-based money laundering. Here they are. Number 1, project location and frequency of expected shipments. You can use technology for this. You can also use advanced technologies for number 2, detecting irregularities in manufacturing numbers. That's an easy one because they have to report numbers. You can detect this. They have to send those reports into the legitimate sources. Number 3, detecting over and under invoicing schemes. That's typically where we catch the predicate crime. Number 4, identifying and associations with other criminal identities. That's the SDN list. That's your FATF list. Hey, who is tied in with this? And that's where you run social media networks. You run things. If you want the actual products that we use, I'll give them to you. But you run the social media analysis for that. Number 5, examining financial transfers to include cryptocurrency transactions. We've already talked about a few ways. Eloisa and Daniel are masters at this. This is where they swim in that lane. It is fantastic to watch. But there are companies that do this professionally, and they're very good. Number 6, uncovering obfuscated beneficiary ownership. There's a couple of companies out there who do this quite well. Again, you have to go ahead and to give them by name, but I'll be quiet for right this second. Let's move on. Number 7, confirming or denying suspected criminal activity. Talking about surveillance, talking about tactical surveillance, which is virtual surveillance, and you don't have to get out of your freaking desk to go watch people anymore. You can use open source intelligence, watching all sorts of different cameras that are in and around the country. And the last one I'll offer you for roles of technology in trade-based money laundering countering is identifying the entities who are blending trade-based money laundering with legitimate businesses. Hezbollah, the narcos, they do this very well. I can go all day about that. Yeah, but there's your 8.
Very good. Thank you very much. Maybe I would like to just throw that to the panel. The issues related to the responsibility of e-commerce platforms and also the education of consumers. Are they doing anything to prevent illicit trade on their platforms? Authentication of products. I obviously know something about that because we are helping them to become more transparent, as you say. I think transparency is key. But any of you, maybe Juan Carlos, you want to say something about the consumer aspect of it? I think you might be very much involved with it.
No, I'm afraid from the consumer point of view, I'm not very good. I would say that I'm more a theoretics than anything else. But I'm keen thinking about what Eloisa mentioned about the statistics, because we tend to think about, like the key element, people thinking of the best part of the business, etc. But at the end, Eloisa was very clear. The money laundering goes with the note, with the cash. I mean, at the end, it's very difficult to imagine that people keep traveling with a suitcase full of money. I mean, it's difficult to think, but it's still happening. I mean, it's an element that, even though we believe that technology, etc., but sometimes part of the business, as I said, as Eloisa mentioned, is still not, people are not really well prepared about financials and how they use these tools. So this is one element. The other is what Joshua says. I mean, I think a key element here on the money laundering is the quality of the merchandise. I mean, what people get, because even though we know that in these big platforms, I mean, let's say Amazon but other, we know that there are a lot of of used materials or whatever that secondhand materials that that oh my goodness, I found this for a quarter of the value, and then I get it, but that is a huge chain of trade behind that. So and as I said, as Joshua says, I mean, when you work with the authorities here and you try to prove, to take, I know that this is happening, but I need the evidence to take it. I will not take to the court, but at least, to have a serious research, a serious investigation, and they look at you like, come on, Juan Carlos. I mean, you know that we don't have the resources to do that. And they say, but come on, I mean, you should. Yeah, we should, but we do not have that amount of money to do this. So it's a huge challenge at every level. So I mean, we have been following here in the University for Peace here in Costa Rica the initiative of the U.S. government in Guatemala. I mean, when Vice President Kamala Harris visited Guatemala, and they organized something, but it's still very difficult. Actually, at the chair of we were following what happened, or at least what they announced, and we know that something happened, but it's still very difficult to follow up. But we know that without external involvement, without the international cooperation, it's very difficult to fight this problem. That will be from my side, Carlos.
Yeah, thank you very much. I guess will be easy, or no, maybe not easy, but it will be a good idea if we all cooperate together, that we can put some kind of process for e-commerce platforms to validate it, that a product, before it gets into the platform, is not feeding illicit trade. We do for tuna that does not kill dolphins, right? So why don't we do it for illicit trade? So that will put some kind of consciousness also on the consumer part, because if you want to solve a problem, it starts by the consumer, basically. If the consumer is willing, and we know in the watch industry, as I mentioned before at the beginning, Switzerland produces 25 million ultra expensive watches. and we get 250 million copy of those watches. But the quality of the copy is getting so good that even if you bring sometimes the fake watch into a boutique, they might repair because they're thinking that they have the real one. I mean, the problem is the quality of those products are getting very, very good. And this is interesting to all the counterfeiting world, which is a major fundraising for this industry, right? So I think international cooperation and stakeholder cooperation in finding concrete solution is something that maybe is missing. Daniel, I want to get back to you on the role of cryptocurrencies or any other virtual assets in promoting trade-based MNL. Maybe you can give us some views on that.
Sure. I think that the primary focus is still on cryptocurrencies specifically. I imagine, though, that at some point we may have cases involving different virtual assets. For instance, I kind of think of the I kind of look at the interest in non-fungible tokens, and I have flashbacks to the interest in initial coin offerings, because there's always an opportunity for fraud whenever you have some type of novel asset emerge in a marketplace, because some people will always fear missing out, and so they become careless, or maybe they don't exactly understand what they're getting into, and they may not be defrauded, but they make bad business decisions. And so I think that there's probably a role for regulators to play in kind of figuring some of those issues out, because they won't necessarily have a law enforcement component. I'm sorry, there's dogs running around. I'm sorry for the interruption. But basically, the only other point I'll make is that I'm trying to find a room where I won't lose signal, and we can all like hear ourselves think. The only other thing that I've kind of noticed is that there are some companies that try to provide analytical tools for blockchain-based assets other than cryptocurrencies that I think would be of use to regulators, because as some, say, institutional investors try to offer virtual assets that are stored in some type of smart contract, there could be, concerns about how to make sure those don't kind of move, say, to addresses that are blacklisted, for instance, or that otherwise violate, any type of regulation. So this kind of requires arguably some capabilities that are like more proactive than reactive in nature. Which would typically be, a law enforcement agent does blockchain analysis because someone reported a ransomware attack. So now you're investigating something that's happened, and you're trying to trace the movement of funds, as opposed to situations where you have, let's say, an asset, which is fine, but your goal is to proactively figure out, how do we make sure that in the first place this doesn't go anywhere it shouldn't go. And so it would be interesting to kind of monitor these things. And I know for myself, in terms of the capacity building that we do, where we have regulators involved, we're trying to identify companies that have tools they're willing to share with government entities precisely for that purpose, so that at least they have some sense of what's available. And that in turn can help inform decisions they want to make about regulation of virtual assets, which in this hemisphere is still being developed. There are a lot of countries that are actively trying to figure out how they want to regulate these assets, and not only how they want to deal with illicit use of them. And so those are just, I think, some of the things to kind of look at as potential solutions. I also want to add that a lot of the leading e-commerce platforms that I've dealt with have, to their credit, tried to stand up counterfeit crimes units or fraud intelligence units at a minimum. Mercado Libre, Amazon, Alibaba. You know, obviously brands can have different opinions about how effective they are, but they've all kind of stood up teams within the last 5 years. And I think it's because they recognize there is some damage to their brand whenever people feel that they've had a bad experience. And so we obviously try to support those efforts as much as possible and make sure that any referrals they want to make to law enforcement in the region get where they need to go.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we only have 10 minutes left. We don't want to stay too long to avoid Zoom fatigue for the participants. Maybe just some closing remarks. We don't have any questions that I see from the audience. So if you have any question, please use the button Q&A and submit the questions. We will be gladly answer them. But maybe just to go around, you guys, and just close the panel with some final points and also some recommendations on how you see the future going. I mean, as one of the subjects of the title is the fourth industrial revolution. As you know, this is a conflicting name. Some people do not understand what that is. But basically, it's the convergence of technologies, the fact that technologies are converging. You have AI being able now to analyze a huge amount of data. You have IoT, 1 trillion objects are connected to the internet, to cloud. So that means the traceability of objects are going to be monitored by very sophisticated cloud. You have quantum computing arriving, which is accelerating exponentially the power of those machines. So we have tools that we didn't have before, and if we use those tools to protect humans, to put the person at the center of gravity, we should be making progress. So maybe some conclusions on that and some recommendations, and then we will close the panel. Maybe I start with you, Eloisa.
Sí, bueno, me gustaría nuevamente destacar y abordar que ya hay herramientas, las nuevas tecnologías, por ejemplo, las de identidad digital, pueden permitir una gestión eficaz aplicada al tema de prevención de lavado de dinero con criptoactivos. Varios países han integrado ya programas nacionales de identidad digital con KYC escalonado para poder hacer estas identificaciones. Y bueno, como una conclusión, me parece que cuando nosotros hablemos de los criptoactivos para hacer uso de los mismos para lavar dinero, es importante establecer las magnitudes y las comparaciones para tener ese termómetro que nos permite identificar en qué medida se está haciendo, ¿no? Definitivamente es un trabajo y es un enfoque que se hace, que es sistémico, es decir, todos los participantes tienen que estar en coordinación para que puedan existir soluciones efectivas, porque de nada sirve que las propias empresas o compañías o la misma industria, por ejemplo, en este caso de proveedores de activos virtuales, hagan esfuerzos importantes para controlar y tener mejor identificados a sus usuarios, si del otro lado también las instituciones o los gobiernos no están preparados, y viceversa, ¿no? También sabemos que una sobreregulación puede en determinado momento hacer más complejo el que los mercados y el que la industria, en este caso la de los criptoactivos, pueda seguir avanzando con prácticas adecuadas y correctas. Eso es lo que me gustaría concluir en este panel, y agradecer mucho el poder estar aquí con personas tan distinguidas.
Muchas gracias. De hecho, Eloisa, hay dos preguntas en español en el Q&A que quizás puedes responder tú directamente sobre temas que yo creo que te pertenecen. Okay, so going back to Joshua, yeah, maybe just to continue on that final remarks.
Okay, final remarks. First and foremost, I think I said it before, which is transparency is the enemy of corruption. That's not a surprise, but it's a good pithy comment. There are 6 bipartisan legislation initiatives that are currently, they have been introduced in the United States Congress, the Crook Act, the Reveal Act, Trap Act, there's several of them. Those are all designed to go ahead to expose and to protect consumers. So those are the types of things which legislatively we are doing in order to hammer out and to expose some of this corruption. Next thing is information sharing is absolutely best facilitated through these fusion centers that are out there. These are multi-agency, multilateral, multinational fusion centers where information comes in and they are focused on a specific problem set and they gather all of this. I've been involved in several of these. The most expansive one had 28 different agencies, all in one community of interest, and it was looking at financial crime. Very effective. Next thing that I want to mention is every organization has got to figure out how best to protect their data and to test the systems even after you've established them. Because like we said, the criminal imagination is expansive and expanding. So you have to test your systems regularly and also fix the vulnerabilities as they are progressed. And the reason why is because when quantum computing comes online, that is going to be a wild disruptor. Quantum computing is going to shred a lot of the existing data security notions that are out there. And that is going to be a very difficult component for corporate, and commercial organizations to overcome. Governments are going to be terrified when they see the extent that quantum computing can actually accomplish in order to expose some of the secrets and classified information. But thank you very much. I appreciate you guys' time and working with this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your inputs. Absolutely. Quantum computer, especially if mixed with AI and other data components, could be totally game changer, disruptive for both sides of the problem. So Daniel, some final conclusions, please.
No, well, just reiterating that I think it's important for both law enforcement officials and regulators and policymakers to think about the tools that they currently have available to deal with money laundering and other traditional crimes, but with non-traditional technologies, and whether or not there needs to be updating so that any enforcement action, whether it's civil or criminal, will be successful. And then obviously to think about what to do where that's not necessarily the answer, because the technology itself is arguably a problem. And it could be that privacy coins, for instance, are really going to test that in a way, because if in fact the lack of transparency is inherent, let's say, to a specific blockchain, does that force regulators or lawmakers to make some tough decisions about whether or not to potentially say, well, we're actually going to prohibit, right, the exchange of this type of currency on a platform that we regulate because we simply can't track it. And I'm not trying to say that that's necessarily an answer, but that not everyone that is in the cryptocurrency space is satisfied with simply pseudo anonymity. They pursue privacy, and arguably as an end in and of itself. I'm not going to attribute bad motives, to people who develop these things, but they may very well pose questions that we obviously don't want to have to answer. But if we're responsible and we're prudent, we have to be as prepared for those as any else that we could face. And so that's about it for me. And thanks again for the invitation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your inputs. Yeah, Joshua, you want to answer that question about many say that the R market is means to launder money. You want to answer that question?
Yeah, I was trying to type in a dang thing wasn't working. I apologize. But the art market is absolutely a mechanism because the value of art raises and lowers, and it's very difficult to go ahead and nail down. The value of art is dependent upon what you're willing to pay. So that is why art is considered to be such a an easy mechanism to launder money. And it's also something that's easy to transfer in and out. You can exchange, you can purchase something for $5,000 and then sell it for $500,000 to someone who just needs to go ahead and launder the money. And then you get to keep the profit, or you get paid, $10,000 for the privilege of going through that. So it is so easy to launder money through the art market. It is the one thing I will say as far as how well it's going. The best people to challenge that are the insurance companies. The insurance companies, the ones who insure these great pieces of art, are the ones that are doing the best financial investigations on the planet, because they're able to really track down the authenticity and to help assign value. So without the insurance companies, I think that we would be just screwed.
Absolutely. The provenance as well with the auction houses, that's for sure. I have Alejo, you want to say something? ¿Quieres entrar, Alejo? Te veo la mano.
Sí, que estaba escuchando atentamente y no puedo acá hacer una pregunta como panelista, así que levanté la mano. A mí me preocupa algo de estos últimos tiempos, que son los flujos migratorios que estamos viendo, sobre todo acá en Centroamérica, flujos migratorios que vienen de África, que vienen de Medio Oriente, que ingresan por países de Sudamérica y van subiendo, pasan el tapón del Darién y siguen subiendo para llegar a la frontera con Estados Unidos y con Canadá. Hemos estado visitando algunos albergues transitorios donde están los migrantes, y vemos ahí, por ejemplo, publicidad de Western Union o de MoneyGram, o uno de estos servicios de transferencia de dinero, y vemos también a todos los migrantes que todos portan un buen teléfono celular, con un teléfono inteligente, sin importar, digamos, lo precaria que pueda ser su condición. Entonces me pregunto si estamos observando esto, ¿no? Porque acá tenemos varios flujos de migrantes donde además se han encontrado, cuando se les hace un bitmap, el registro de huellas a nivel global, se han encontrado alertas terroristas que tratan de colarse en el flujo migratorio, y no solo terroristas, sino personas que tienen órdenes de capturas, digamos, de alto valor en algún país. Entonces, si estamos viendo esto, digo, porque realmente esto puede ser preocupante, ¿no?
Any comment on that? Using immigration flows as a way to infiltrate? So yeah, absolutely. Maybe from my side, because we have been working with several international organizations on that in Geneva here of the UN, is that digital identification, and I think Eloisa mentioned that as well, is a tool that is available, right? Digital identification is a tool that can be used for providing both at the telephone level, but also by just having an identity, digital identity on the net, some traceability back again to the person, especially when you are dealing with this complex situation. We have the same problem here in Europe as well, as the immigration into the European continent through both Greece and Spain is reflecting the same problem. So technology is there. The question is whether we are ready at the international level to reinforce that technology. Any other comment or remarks from the panelists? You want to say something else as a conclusion, or I think we are done? We covered a lot of subjects. So the recording is being broadcast in Zoom, but also in YouTube. We will send you the link so you can use it internally if you want to broadcast, or just keep it as a reference. And maybe just to close in the panel, just to reiterate, and we will meet again in Colombia, in Barranquilla, the 2nd and the 3rd of December. And we hope by then to even mature more this idea of international cooperation on this subject. This is required. I think this needs to be open to anyone that wants to help I think there's a lot of good work being done by a lot of NGOs and a lot of private sector companies. I think if we bring them together to this discussion, we will see exponential results as again, we are using technology that can help us to achieve good results. So it's not only the bad guys that can use it, but also the people that want to solve the problem. Okay, so without no further remarks, I would like to thank you, the panelists, for this very interesting exchange. I hope the participants have enjoyed, and I wish you the best, and I look forward to see you in Colombia when we will meet all of them there. Thank you very much. All the best.